Welcome back to another loose nut printing video. In this video, we're going to be setting up the printer config for our voron build. It's going to be a rough one, so let's get into it. So the first thing that we're going to be doing is adding the main sail config to our printer config. So we'll simply plop over to our config, our printer config I should say, and we'll add that right at the top here. And simply that is bracket include mainsail.config. And now with that typed, and we can save it, pop over to the dashboard to make sure it worked. Yeah, and it looks like we got a couple extra things. Now with that done, we can now start getting our printer set up. So the first thing we're going to be doing is changing our size. I measured out the X to be 322, so we're going to have to change our end stop and max travel. And one other thing I know I had to change was the direction pin. And thanks to my buddy Corbin, again, if it wasn't for him, this project wouldn't have gone like it has. So he gave me some TMC 2209s. So I was like, oh, thank you. So I simply threw those onto the X, Y, and extruder since he gave me 4. So now with the TMC set up for the X, we now have to move over to the Y. And if you've ever set up Clipper before, you just realize something that's gonna bite us later on. So just keep that in mind, guys. And now we'll enable the TMC part for the Y. And lucky enough, I remembered the current for the stepper drivers and didn't have to check them again. Now with our X and Y coordinates done, we can now get our center point for home, and it's simply just halving the positions or cutting them in half, or dividing them in half I should say, and that will give us our center point on our bed. So we'll just simply do 161 and 156, and boom, we have now our printer telling, or we now are telling our printer where home is. So simply save. Good practice once you do one setting change to save it. And now we can test to make sure it's on a home. I'm just making sure that the M stop there, or ZN stop, was triggering. And now we can just send it to the home position. And well, boom, we have it at home. And now with it knowing where center is, we can give it a test to see the movement that it will travel the proper distance without colliding, and looks like X is perfect. Now we'll try out Y to see how it moves, and yep, we're getting perfect travel. So now that's set, we can now move on to getting our probe, our Z probe offset set up, since now the printer knows where home is. So we simply type in probe config, and that will pull up this little menu, and that will allow us to move our bed, in this case, up and down to the point where we can start testing to see how close the nozzle is with a piece of paper. If you ever leveled a bed before, or printer before, one of the most low-tech procedures in the whole operations of doing 3D printing. And once we get it to the spot we like it, we'll just tell it accept and make sure to save. Do not turn off the printer and before saving, because if you do, it will not write to the config. So I'm just checking here to just double check that it did save it to the config, and it did. So that's great. Now we have those two done. We can now move on to getting the dual lead screws working, and that's called Z-tilt. So right here I'm just measuring how far the probe is from the edge of the bed, and I do that on both sides of the printer. And you're also going to need to know where the physical stepper drivers are relation to the nozzle. Your nozzle might not be able to get to that point, but you need to know that point. So that's what this here, the Z position is. That is the physical location of your stepper motors you need. And the simple way to get that measurement is just move your tool head over, or if you already know your measurement like we did from earlier, we just add the distance to our number. Mine was 313, yours will probably be different. So simply put those in, and obviously you can't go past 0 except negative. And then the second set of numbers here is the physical point it's going to be probing. And you're going to add your probe offset to the location of Y just to get the probe in center. Then the next set of numbers here, speed is obviously how quick it moves back and forth. The horizon move is how far it'll push the Z away. Retries is how many times it will try it. So I'm telling it 20 times. And retry tolerance, if you set that to a larger number, you don't have to do so many retries. I'm trying to get a really tight mesh. And well, we can now save it like we did and give it a shot. And you can see here that the bed's pretty skewed. I did that just to demonstrate how Z-tilt works. And you can see just after one probe, it moved that one lead screw down to the point where it was pretty good. And it's just going to move back and forth until it hits its tolerance. And once it hits the tolerance, it's done. And you can then move on to the next thing. And well, unfortunately to say, oh, that was a 4-day ordeal. And I was constantly getting this with bed mesh, which turned out to be I had the motors plugged in wrong on the main board. And after I got it figured out, I got a bed mesh map like this to find out the bed is completely toast. And not really worth doing much more tuning until we can get a new bed and everything. I'm going to try to straighten it out, but this is all I got for you guys this week. Have a good one, and see you next week for probably some entertainment.